All right, so are you ready to do a deep dive with me into F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
You guys sent in a really interesting mix of stuff for us this time. I mean, we've got excerpts from The Great Gatsby. We've got a podcast interview with a journalist named Joe Nira, and we even have some background on historical figures like Arnold Rothstein.
Oh, wow.
It's,
That's quite a combination.
it is.
Yeah.
So much to unpack. I'm excited. Where should we even begin?
Well, I think the best place to start is with the big question.
Okay,
Who was Jay Gatsby based on?
that's a good question.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we know that Fitzgerald drew inspiration from real people.
He did, right.
Right.
Like I remember reading that Daisy Buchanan was based on Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda.
Yes. And his first love, Ginevra King.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then there's Meyer Wolfsheim, that shady businessman.
Right.
He was actually modeled after a real gangster,
Oh.
Arnold Rothstein.
Oh, wow. So it really makes you think, I mean, how much of Gatsby's story is actually rooted in reality?
That is a very good question, and it's one that a lot of scholars have been trying to answer for decades now. But there is one figure in particular that keeps popping up.
Okay.
His name is Max Gerlach.
Max Gerlac.
Yeah, now academics and there's also a journalist named Joe Nira. They've all suggested that Gerlach may be the real-life inspiration for Jay Gatsby.
And Joe Nira, he's the one who hosts the podcast American Dreamer. Who was Jay Gatsby?
Wait, it's the one, yes.
Okay, and that podcast, it goes into Gerlach's life, right?
It does, yeah.
Okay. What makes them think that Gerlach is the key to understanding who Gatsby was?
Well, for one thing, there are some really interesting parallels between the two men. Like, both Gatsby and Gerlach were German immigrants
Okay.
who reinvented themselves here in America.
Right.
They both amassed a lot of wealth and achieved a high social status. But, and this is important, they might have done it through, shall we say, illicit means.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they were both chasing a version of the American dream, but maybe they weren't always playing by the rules, you know?
Right. Well, I do remember reading in the book that Gatsby was pretending to be an Oxford man.
Exactly. And you know what?
Did Gerlach fabricate his past too?
He did. He claimed to be American-born from Yonkers, New York.
Wow.
Total fabrication.
So they both created these elaborate backstories for themselves.
Oh, they did. But here's where things get really, really interesting.
Okay.
Gerlach actually sent Fitzgerald a note, and it was signed Old Sport,
Old Sport. Wait, that's
Gatsby's signature phrase.
Gatsby's thing, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that little detail right there, that's pretty significant. I mean, it suggests that Fitzgerald knew about Gerlach.
They had to have, right?
It adds a lot of weight to the theory that he might have based Gatsby on him.
Yeah. And this note, how was it discovered?
So a professor by the name of Matthew Bruckley, he found it back in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's actually what sparked a whole wave of research into Gerlach's life.
So we've got Gatsby and Gerlach. They're both reinventing themselves, potentially involved in some shady dealings. I mean, this really speaks to the underbelly of the Roaring Twenties, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't talk about the Roaring Twenties without talking about Prohibition.
All right.
And bootlegging was rampant.
Yeah.
Both Gatsby and Gerlach were involved in that world.
They were.
In fact, Nera's research uncovered records of Gerlach being arrested twice for running speakeasies.
Wow.
Yeah. So this adds another layer of complexity to their stories. You know, it's like they were both chasing the American dream, but they were doing it in a world where the lines between right and wrong were, well, they were a bit blurred.
What makes you think about Fitzgerald himself, you know? He struggled with alcoholism, and in The Great Gatsby, there's all those extravagant parties, all the gin. I mean, could that be more than just a literary device? Could it be a reflection of his own life, of the excesses of that era?
It's a very astute observation.
Yeah.
And you're right, you can't ignore the biographical elements that bleed into Fitzgerald's work.
Right.
There's definitely a sense of disillusionment with the American dream that runs through The Great Gatsby, and also a fascination with the destructive nature of excess. I mean, it's almost like he's warning us about the darker side of that dream, you know, the price you pay for chasing wealth and status.
So you think he's saying that to achieve the American dream, you have to be a little bit crooked?
I think that's a question that Fitzgerald was grappling with. I mean, remember, he was writing during a time of immense social and economic change.
Right.
He saw both the allure and the danger of ambition. The Great Gatsby doesn't offer easy answers, but it certainly forces us to confront these complexities.
That's so true.
Mm.
It's not just a love story. It's not just a period piece. It's a commentary on society, on human nature, on the cost of our desires.
Exactly. And that's where I think the character of Nick Carraway becomes so important.
Right, Nick. He's the narrator.
He is, but he also acts as a kind of detective. He's piecing together Gatsby's past. He's trying to understand his motivations.
Kind of like Joe Nera digging into those historical records.
Exactly.
They're both on this journey of discovery, trying to uncover the truth behind a very carefully constructed facade.
Precisely. And just like Nera encountered all sorts of dead ends and unexpected discoveries,
Yeah.
Nick has his own moments of revelation as he gets closer to the truth about Gatsby.
And there's that one pivotal scene, the one where Gatsby introduces Nick to Meyer Wolfsheim.
Oh, yeah. That's a turning point for sure.
Right. Because it kind of exposes Gatsby's connection to the criminal underworld. It starts to chip away at the illusion that he's created.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of those lavish parties and all that extravagant wealth, there's a darker reality lurking beneath the surface. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about Gatsby.
It's like Fitzgerald wanted us to question everything.
Indeed. He wanted us to look beyond the surface, to question our assumptions about the American dream, to consider its complexities.
I want to revisit the book.
It's amazing how a fresh perspective, a bit of context, can change how you see things.
Yeah, it totally can.
Speaking of context, I think it's time we shift gears a bit and delve a little deeper into Joe Nera's research process. His investigation into Max Gerlac, it really does read like a detective story.
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah.
Following those leads from Professor Bruckley, digging through those archives at the University of South Carolina and Princeton University, it sounds fascinating.
It was fascinating, full of unexpected twists and turns. He even tried to track down people who were connected to Gerlac, and that led to some rather amusing dead ends.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, there was that story about him trying to find Gerlac's girlfriend through her granddaughter.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it turns out that the granddaughter, she had no idea about her grandmother's connection to Gerlac.
That's wild. A real genealogical mystery.
It is, and it's a good reminder that history is often fragmented. It's incomplete. There are always missing pieces of the puzzle.
And sometimes those missing pieces make the story even more intriguing.
Precisely. It's funny because Nera's investigation, it almost mirrors Nick's journey in the novel.
Oh, how so?
They're both trying to piece together this puzzle, trying to understand what makes this enigmatic figure tick, their motivations, their desires.
Right.
And they both uncover some unsavory truths along the way.
Yeah. And it's not just Gatsby's made-up past, but his connection to the criminal underworld, too.
Exactly.
Nera found out that Gerlac wasn't exactly a saint either. I mean, he was involved in bootlegging, ran speakeasies, maybe even connected to figures like Arnold Rothstein.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it reinforces this idea that the pursuit of the American dream, especially during the Roaring Twenties, often had a dark side.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what compromises did people have to make to achieve their aspirations,
Yeah. I mean, do you think Fitzgerald is suggesting that to get ahead back then, you had to be a little crooked?
That's the question that hangs over the entire novel, really.
It does.
He doesn't give us any easy answers, but he definitely presents a pretty cynical view of the era.
He does.
I mean, it's like he's not just critiquing the individual choices, but the societal forces that shape them. The allure of wealth, the pressure to conform, this idea that you can buy happiness,
Right.
It's a critique that I think still resonates today.
It does, yeah.
We're still grappling with the same issues. We're still fascinated by stories about wealth and power, and we're still debating what the American dream really means.
Yeah, it feels very relevant.
It is, and I think that's why The Great Gatsby endures. It taps into these fundamental human desires and anxieties.
Right.
And it forces us to really examine the cost of our ambitions, both on a personal level and as a society.
Yeah, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? At the heart of it is Gatsby's love for Daisy.
It's true. There is a romantic element to his pursuit.
There is, even if it is a little misguided.
Oh, it's very misguided. And I think that's what makes Gatsby such a tragic figure, really. He's driven by this idealized vision of the past, this belief that he can just recapture a lost love by accumulating wealth and status.
Yeah.
He's trying to buy his way back into Daisy's heart, but it's impossible.
And it also highlights this theme of class and social mobility that runs throughout the whole book, right?
Well, absolutely.
Gatsby may have the money, but he can never truly penetrate that upper echelon of society that Daisy represents.
Yeah. He's forever an outsider looking in. It's a theme that resonates with, I think, a lot of people. That feeling of being excluded no matter how hard you try to fit in, to belong.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the historical context of The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
Fitzgerald was writing in the aftermath of World War I. It was a period of, immense social and economic upheaval.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Roaring Twenties were a time of great change and contradiction.
Yeah, there was a sense of liberation and excess, but also this underlying anxiety about the future.
Like this looming threat of the Great Depression that was just around the corner.
Right, exactly.
And Fitzgerald captures this tension so brilliantly in the novel. He shows us the glamour and the excitement of the Jazz Age.
He does.
But he also hints at the fragility of this world, the sense that it's all built on a shaky foundation.
So do you think Max Gerlach was truly the inspiration for Gatsby?
I mean, Nira makes a compelling case.
He does.
But it's a mystery that we may never definitively solve.
Might not.
And that's part of what keeps the story so intriguing. Yeah.
We're left to ponder these connections between fact and fiction, between real-life figures and their literary counterparts.
It's like we become detectives ourselves.
We do.
Sifting through the clues, trying to piece together the narrative.
And just as with any good mystery, there are always more questions than answers.
That's true. I do remember Nira mentioned how different generations have interpreted the American dream, from that post-war stability to the 80s, focus on material wealth. It's interesting.
It's a concept that's constantly evolving, and I think Fitzgerald's take on it in The Great Gatsby feels particularly relevant today. We're still grappling with those same questions. What does it mean to achieve the American dream? Is it attainable for everyone? At what cost?
Right. And Fitzgerald doesn't offer any simple answers.
No.
He compels us to confront those questions. He shows us the allure, the potential pitfalls of chasing a dream, and asks us to really consider what truly matters in life.
Yeah. He seems to be suggesting that true happiness, it isn't about material success or social status.
Right. It's about something deeper, something more authentic, maybe genuine connection or finding purpose beyond ourselves.
Yeah. And that message, that transcends any particular era, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's as relevant today as it was back in the 1920s.
It is. And that's one of the reasons The Great Gatsby continues to resonate with readers almost a century later.
It's true. It's a timeless exploration of the human condition, our desires, our struggles, our search for meaning.
I know we talked about the context a little bit earlier, but I thought it was really fascinating how Nira connected The Great Gatsby with a real-life murder case from 1922, the Hall Mills case. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. Sarah Churchwell, she actually wrote a book about it. She argued that the case, it reflects some of the same themes that we see in the novel. Crime, social upheaval, moral ambiguity. It's like Fitzgerald was really tapping into the anxieties and uncertainties of a society that was on the brink of change.
It's fascinating.
It is, and it reminds us that even the most fantastical stories are often rooted in reality.
Yeah, they are. And speaking of reality, I have to give Joe Nera credit for his dedication to uncovering the truth about Max Gerlach. I mean, his research process, it sounds like a real-life detective story. All those twists, turns, and dead ends.
Oh, he was incredibly persistent.
He was.
Can you imagine trying to track down Gerlach's girlfriend through her granddaughter?
Yeah.
Only to discover that she knew absolutely nothing about her grandmother's past.
I mean, that must have been frustrating for him at times. But
it must have been.
But it's also a testament to the power of historical research, Sometimes those unexpected discoveries lead to the most valuable insights.
It's true. The past is often fragmented and incomplete. But by piecing together those fragments, we can gain a deeper understanding of who we are, where we come from.
Yeah. And sometimes the most rewarding discoveries come from the most unexpected places.
Exactly.
It's remarkable, how Fitzgerald captures the essence of the Roaring Twenties.
Oh.
Like such a specific time and place.
It really is.
But also explores these timeless themes that resonate with us even now, almost 100 years later.
I think that's what makes him such a great writer.
Yeah, it's true. He creates these vivid descriptions. You can almost feel yourself at one of Gatsby's parties. But he also goes deeper, into their motivations, their desires. The characters feel so real.
I agree. Like, they could be people we know grappling with issues we see every day.
Exactly, yeah. Wealth inequality, social mobility, the allure, the danger of the American dream. I mean,
right.
We're still talking about these things.
We are, and it's interesting because Fitzgerald's take on the American dream itself, It's not straightforward.
Right.
He doesn't give you a simple definition or tell you how to get it. It's more nuanced than that.
It is. Gatsby's story, I think, really exemplifies that.
It does.
Gatsby, he gets the material success, right? Throws the lavish parties, surrounds himself with all the beautiful things. But he's not happy.
It's not.
He's chasing this dream that he can never actually reach, a past he can never really recapture.
Right. It begs the question, what does success really mean?
Exactly. Is it just the wealth, the status, or is it something more? Fitzgerald seems to be saying it's more about genuine connection, finding a purpose that's bigger than just yourself.
And that message, it goes beyond just one generation or time period. It's timeless.
It really is. We can all get caught up in wanting more money, more things.
Right.
But Fitzgerald reminds us that those deeper connections are what give life meaning.
Absolutely.
So I have a question. Knowing that Gatsby might be based on a real person, Max Gerlac, does that change how you interpret the novel's message, this idea of the American dream?
That's a good question, and it's one I want to leave with our listeners. Does knowing Gatsby might have a real-life counterpart make his story more tragic, more relatable, or maybe even in some way hopeful?
It really makes you think. Reading The Great Gatsby now, with this new knowledge, I feel like it would almost be a brand new experience.
I think so too. And that's what I love about literature. It invites us to come back to these stories, see them in a new light as we change and grow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive has really given me a fresh perspective on The Great Gatsby, and I think I'll be thinking about this for a while.
That's what we like to hear. We hope you'll go back and revisit the novel, explore these questions about the American dream, see what new insights you discover.
And who knows, maybe you'll even do a little digging yourself like Joe Nera.
You never know what you might find.
That's true. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into The Great Gatsby.